Hey, you've made it to SprySpace, where people managing social media accounts come for community. This year, our focus is social media for good. Together, we can work to make social media a landscape for healthy online communities to grow. Sound good? Then come along with us on the SprySpace podcast, where we share what we know, learn what we don't, and strive to make social media better for us all. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SprySpace podcast. I'm Lacey, and today I have Adrienne here with me. We are continuing our series this month on films regarding social media and the internet, and anything that makes us bring around more social media for good. Let's be real here. Our topic today is quite... we both feel quite fiery and passionate about it. And so instead of doing our normal opening and closing questions, I'm just going to get us right into the content because there's a lot to go over. So, Adrienne, what's the documentary that we're covering today?
It is called The Great Hack.
And it was released January 2019, directed by Jahan Najim and her husband, whose name is Karima Mayer. And this is a big deal here, okay? So the overarching theme, this documentary film revolves around the Facebook Cambridge Analytica data scandal. In normal people's speech, we like to say that's like it's about the massive Facebook experiment from 2016 that went wildly wrong, and I would say is continuing to go wildly wrong. The ripples are being felt and are continuing massively. So, Adrienne, how'd you feel watching this documentary?
Like every 5 minutes, I wanted to explode in anger.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It was incredibly frustrating. People that should know better, not knowing better, just the blatant greed of the whole situation. Just a lot of confusing pieces, and we'll get into it later, but there's a little bit of the some of the stuff that the filmmakers didn't talk about also made me a little bit not angry, but just made me do my own research at the end. I went and kind of dug in on a few things, so it definitely made me think, and I think that it's a good documentary to watch. And then also especially keeping in mind that it was made in 2019, before 2020 and the pandemic, and right now with the all the content out there on vaccines and vaccine misinformation, and kind of this war that the healthcare industry or the healthcare field is fighting right now. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, I felt pretty fiery as well. Hot in my chest, making me want to act. So I'm glad that we have this time together to kind of go over it today, because I'm sure a lot of that's going to come out. We like to look back at who directed films in order to just understand really what perspective these are coming from. So, from everything that we did with our research, we saw that Jahan Najim was a very brilliant woman, went to Harvard, studied film studies there, and Adrienne brought to my attention too that, went to Harvard, same place Mark Zuckerberg went to Harvard too. So
yeah, interesting.
So let's talk about a few things that were kind of misleading from this film. Okay, so we did our research watching it, took really good notes throughout it, and a few things seemed to kind of jump out at us as kind of misleading. So why don't we start there? Adrienne, can you start there?
Yeah. Well, and we did some research before this about The Great Hack, and actually the film that Jahan had started was about the hack, the Sony hack, back, and I can't remember when, but it was about something else. And then the film morphed into something different when the Cambridge Analytica scandal happened. And they probably just kept the name. Maybe that's what happened. But I really think not knowing that that's really kind of the project started with the Sony hack and then morphed into this other thing. It's a little bit misleading because I feel like they didn't go into the technical details of that Facebook wasn't hacked. And so if you watch the film and you don't really know that, you don't really understand how technically this all worked, that you would assume that Cambridge, they still did hack it some way, because people honestly don't really know how hacking works. Like the general population, they don't really know. And I feel like the word hack is like one of those words like disrupt. It's lost its meaning kind of. And it's just, anyway. So I just think that it's a little bit misleading, because what originally they meant the hack as the hack of our brains, of the behavior. But it's not, that's what it is IRL, but in the film, it's a little bit, it's not clear that that's what they mean
by the great hack.
Yeah, and I could see how somebody would watch this and be like, oh, Cambridge Analytica hacked Facebook, when that's not what happened.
So let's talk about how Cambridge Analytica did actually end up getting the data that they did, because the overarching quote-unquote scandal is that in 2016, the Trump campaign worked with Cambridge Analytica to spend millions and millions of dollars on advertising, a ton of that through Facebook itself, and used data that they got from Facebook to decide who they were going to put this content out to and what kind of messages they were going to put out to people. So how did they actually get that data? If they didn't hack Facebook for that data, how did they get it?
So there's just several different layers to this, right? With everything. But originally the data was gotten, that was per terms of service. They got the data originally in their original source. They got it in a perfectly fine way according to Facebook's terms of service. Basically what happened when you build apps back in, when I was working in a startup building apps in 2014, 2015, for developers, there is this, it's called Facebook login. And so basically when you build an app, right, the hardest part of building an app and getting it to take off so you can, make all that money and continue on with your life, the hardest thing to do when you're building app is making the onboarding process easy, because the second somebody downloads your app, right, and then it's hard, they're going to abandon it. They're going to delete it. They're not going to use it. So when you're doing app development, you want it to be as easy as possible for people to log in and start using the thing, right? So what you could do is use your Facebook login. So basically what that is when you download your app, oftentimes, even still, it'll say login with Facebook, login with Google, or create your own login. Now, I always create my own login, because back 2016, basically, in Facebook terms of service, if I downloaded a let's say a gaming app, right? I downloaded it and I was like, all right, use my Facebook login. What would happen is Facebook would then gather all my public data, right? But then all the data of my friends without their consent. So that means that like my mom, all my college friends, all my friends from my various jobs, everything, all of their public profile information, and then again we can kind of go into like privacy issues and your settings and how your settings are set, but like anything that was publicly available would be basically gathered and used in that Facebook login, which, obviously, who reads terms of service? Who looks at that closely? So that is how the data was gathered.
Yeah, originally. You remember a friend would post something and it would be like, which Disney princess are you?
Yes.
Belle, right?
Yes.
And it's like, would you like to try this quiz?
Yes.
And so you would push that, yes, I'd like to try that. And then a pop-up would come up and it would say, do you accept this? And it would have Facebook, and I always thought, even then, when I was in college, I was like, I do think it's strange that it says like, do you give this app, permission to see all your friends and all your things, and you just hit, you have to just hit yes, right?
Yeah.
And so you hit yes, you figure out who your Disney princess that you're like, and do you want to share your results? And you'd click share your results, and then it would become kind of this viral thing that people would just share. And so then everybody who has done that, and every one of their friends, now everything that they liked on Facebook, every reaction that they made on Facebook, every place they checked in on Facebook, all that data was transferred to these third-party app developers. Now they had full access to all of that data, and that's exactly how this data was mined. Some people would say, not hacked, but legally gotten
Right.
through the process.
The incorrect or wrong thing that happened, or allegedly what Facebook says, like, oh, it's not our fault because someone else did bad, is basically you're not supposed to, like, if you're a developer, you're not supposed to give that data to anybody else. You're not supposed to transfer. So the moment that they transferred the data over to Cambridge Analytica was a violation of terms of service. Therefore, Facebook shouldn't be in trouble. However, it's like, well, why did Facebook allow this to begin at the beginning? So let's think about that. Why would Facebook want to allow developers to do this? Well, exactly what, like you just said, Lacey, for growth. Their growth team, they want to reach as many people as possible. The easiest way to get as many people as possible is to access all of your friends. So if I download Facebook or a different app, they want to be able to know, okay, how many phone numbers does Adrienne have in her phone? How many of these numbers already have a Facebook account? And which ones don't have a Facebook account? And how do we get them to become a Facebook user, right? Because that was kind of what was going on there. So kind of another thing where they're like, oh, probably they weren't thinking that all this nefarious stuff would happen. They're just making fun toys and things on the internet, right?
Yeah, and they're thinking about the amount of investment dollars that they can get because of the growth numbers that they can show. They're not thinking at all about how it affects actual human beings who are their users. They're thinking about those growth numbers. This is why we come back time and time again to the importance of actually thinking of people as people, and not using growth hacking and growth tactics to make a product successful, but thinking of how it can actually serve the people that it's meant to serve, which makes you wonder who is this actually serving, right?
Right. Exactly.
So if they didn't hack said information, but the title is still The Great Hack, what we understand about the directors that they were actually very interested in how these tactics hacked human behavior. Okay.
Yes.
And when we talk about the social dilemma, some of the main characters, the main people interviewed in the social dilemma, talked about the things that they were the most concerned about was this: how human behavior could be tracked, changed, altered, predicted based on the amount of advertising dollars going towards a certain subset of people. So in the film, they talked about the idea. One of the main people interviewed in the film, Brittany Kaiser, talked about the fact that they were knowingly creating a culture war. Okay, they called it a grossly unethical experiment, that they were playing with the psychology of a nation. But this is interesting. It was an experiment, right? But in order for something to actually be classified as an experiment, what does it need to have, Adrienne?
Well, maybe before we go into the classification of what an experiment is, can you give us a brief overview on like what Cambridge Analytica did? Like, what is a story? Like, what is the story of what they did and why we're even talking about this? Let's just go back a little bit.
So this was called Project Alamo, okay? And Cambridge Analytica partnered with the Trump campaign to create and spend millions and millions of dollars of advertising on Facebook, YouTube, Google, okay? So they created content specifically targeted at people who they called
the persuadables.
Okay, so they found, looking at people's online behavior, the things they liked, the things they commented on, the things they shared in specific states, right? So they wouldn't even focus on states that were automatically red or automatically blue. They focused on the states that could switch either way, that could either vote Republican or Democratic. And they focused even further in on specifically the people whose personalities, based on their Facebook behavior, said that they were persuadable, that they could be convinced one way or another how to vote. And so, they brag throughout the film about creating even specific commercials. The Crooked Hillary campaign. The guy talks about coming up with this idea and how the O's are the handcuffs. And they took this video content and pushed it out specifically to the persuadables, and did it through unbranded, untrackable content. So you could create like thousands of Facebook pages that say like Republicans for Trump, Girl Scouts for Trump. I mean, really, you could say you wouldn't do something that's branded, but nothing branded. It was just they'd come up with kind of a name of something that could be a group that some people could get behind, and they would put content out for that and put advertising dollars behind it. Totally unbranded, totally untrackable.
So they would spread rumors as an experiment, Brittany talks about in this film, how basically it's an experiment, right? Because the cool thing about social media, the intoxicating thing about social media, the thing that you and I love is you create this content and you put it out there and you see how many people like it. And then based on that, you tweak it a little bit and then you make a new thing and you send it out more. And you keep this a constant feedback loop, and for when you're experimenting, it's really exciting. It's very exciting, right?
Especially with that much money, how much data you could actually get.
Yes, they're paying $1 million a day.
Not to mention that
on Facebook
that they had, because of the high budget that they were paying and because of the connections that these people have, they had representatives from Facebook, from Google, from YouTube helping them to get their ads placed, okay?
Right.
Which now is why so many of us social media managers, especially those of us working with nonprofit groups or groups that are cause-based more than product-based, are running up against these issues of having to create disclaimers and getting the disclaimers verified properly and having so many ads rejected because of one word wrong. So Facebook is trying with their bots to make up for the mass issues that were being caused by this project.
Right.
But they had representatives there helping these people at this time. But here we are, small businesses, nonprofits, dealing with bots every day who are making up for what Facebook representatives were there helping people with. It's extremely frustrating, and it's so backwards. And it just shows again, who is it serving? I don't think it's ever really been serving humans, but serving the dollar. Yeah. The people with the dollars.
And to be fair, like kind of going back onto the filmmakers, one thing that did bug me a little bit is they did talk about like Cambridge Analytica, how all this like kind of shady stuff they were doing, and like how much money the Trump campaign was spending. But they didn't say if the Clinton campaign had their own representatives. Yeah. We don't know. I don't know. Like, maybe they did. And if they did, if it was like, even in that way, like, I don't know. And then they also talk about how much money was spent. The Clinton campaign spent, I'm sure they spent a ton of money as well, but it wasn't super, you know what I mean? It was kind of like,
it's still only showing us one side of a specific story. So,
exactly.
So we can't use it to demonize like a singular campaign. It's really an analysis of how the system can be used to exploit people.
Exactly. And the other scary thing about this too is that Cambridge Analytica was not, they just really got caught, and they got, the people started asking them questions, but there's definitely other companies out there like doing the same thing. So that's just kind of like
during the Senate hearings too, when Mark Zuckerberg was in there for the Senate hearings, you can see how many times that he says Cambridge Analytica, how can we work hard to make sure that that's the scapegoat?
Yes.
Right? Can we say their name enough times and say scandal next to their name enough times? They're doing the same thing, to make that the scapegoat, so that anything else that's still going on we don't have to talk about that anymore because we already dealt with the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's what was going on. But when we think about it, this was a experiment, Brittany Kaiser called it. Okay, so creating this culture war as a grossly unethical experiment. So what's so wrong about an experiment, Adrienne? What's so wrong about them doing this as an experiment on us?
Well, think about it. Let's think about it as a human being. Do you want to be part of an experiment without your consent, without without saying, yeah, I want to participate in this sleep study, or yeah, I want to be a participant. I want to donate my blood to see, whatever medical studies. There are lots of other different consumer advocacy, consumer things where you like opt in to do a survey. You opt in. You're not just randomly scraped, and you get this data and then it's like used against you.
It makes me want to write a parody commercial of like, we're looking for 100 million participants for a political study.
Right.
How quickly here's what you're going to be compensated. You're going to be compensated with ruined family relationships, a total lack of trust for your government and fellow man. All you have to do is become addicted to this platform and get really good at using the share button and reading headlines. The end. And
reacting in rage. Yeah. So I mean, when you are doing experiments that, when you are running a scientific experiment that gets published in like scientific journals, this happens in, there's private research and then there's like academic research, but both types of research, in any research institution, anywhere, any academic journal, any findings that you have, back to the scientific method. You have an experiment, right? You write it down, you conduct your experiment, and then you give your experiment over and your results over to somebody else. And if it's replicable without anybody that was originally involved in the original experiment, and the experiment gets run and you get the same results, that's a scientific method, right? However, when you do all of your research and you collect this data and you do your field analysis and you're gathering all these data points, when you're dealing with human beings, there is a very high level of like ethical standards you have to abide by when you are running these experiments for anybody in the health field and in psychology. If I have a friend who actually also works at Harvard. She's a sleep researcher. And so quite often on Facebook will say, hey, we're looking for, children ages 3 to 8, that their parents will consent to like a sleep study. Here are all the things we're going to do. And that's the hardest part of your experiment, actually, when you're doing proper research methodology. The hardest part is getting qualified participants and tracking and logging all of their logging all of the information that you need to. You need to make sure that they're not vulnerable. They're not a vulnerable population, because there's been terrible things have happened in the past with experiments on human beings that have gone on. So all of these experiments that go on IRL have this like super high level of ethical scrutiny, which you could always argue there should be more. But with Facebook, there is zero oversight.
No.
Zero. There's nobody being like, will spreading rumors on the internet damage anybody's like brain or like, I don't know.
So if it's not an experiment, it's propaganda.
Yes.
If it's not it's not an experiment if there is a specific goal and outcome that you're trying to accomplish without the people who are involved in the experiment knowing.
Right.
You're manipulating people to get a certain outcome that you want. And what's interesting about this is Cambridge Analytica used to be called SCL, which was actually a communications warfare company. They were actually hired by governments to go into warring territories and use pamphlets, words, physical freaking paper, words on paper to hand out to specific people to keep them from joining one side or the other. That was their job. So that's now what we've basically done is digitized that, and instead of having these physical pamphlets that they're passing out as part of communications warfare between warring countries, they're taking two democratic parties and treating them as warring countries and doing the same communications warfare, but on people who are supposed to love each other. Like,
Yeah, no, it's also funny in this being a communications professional, right? Lacey, you and I watched this with kind of like, the bullshit detector. Like, okay, they say this, but they're really meaning this, right?
Yes.
When you watch this, and if you are not watching really carefully, you are like, oh, they're just a tech firm. They're like tech bros. But what they're actually doing is called psyops, which psyops from Wikipedia are operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. So Cambridge Analytica was engaged in psyops. While they say, "Oh, we were just reaching the persuadables. That's all we were doing. We're just marketing." And they soften it. They're they soften it, like, oh, we're just using Facebook, but they're using psyops against us. And the other thing is that they're based in the UK. It's a foreign company. Like, and in the film, they it wasn't just the US that they created campaigns for. They did campaigns all over the world for different governments. So it's just like, how, like, wrapping your brain around all of the questions of, like, is this right or wrong? Like, if you think that, like, Facebook should be able to, like, take our data, this and that, whatever, okay, but essentially, do you also think that, like, a private company based in the UK should be able to influence people in elections all over the world?
Right. Is that something you're for?
Is that something we want?
Is that something we want? Because we are the thing that actually makes these platforms valuable. It's our participation in them that makes them valuable. It's our presence on them that makes them valuable. Every action we take has a certain value as companies are learning more and more about it. And it's one thing to be advertised for, a pair of shoes that you're talking about needing. It's one thing to be served a pair of shoes. It's another thing for it to infiltrate who leads our countries. Whether we stay in or out of unions of countries. It's a very different level when we're talking about bringing politics and world leadership into a place where we're supposed to just be talking to our friends.
Yes.
Right? And we're being hit with all of this advertising from there.
Yeah. Yep.
Alexander Nix, who was the leader over at Cambridge Analytica, said, these sorts of technologies can and will continue to make a huge difference for many years to come. And, he was giving this as almost like a TED style talk about, like, just the amazing nature of data and what we can do with data. It baffles me that he was confident enough to stand on stage in front of a group of people talking about what they were doing without any fear of repercussion, without any fear of, because people just either didn't understand or didn't know to care at that point.
Right. Yeah. Which brings us to the next topic of discussion, which is one of the main characters of this film. Should we talk about that next?
Yeah.
Or is that okay?
Yeah. About Brittany Kaiser in the film?
Yes.
So they portray Brittany Kaiser in the film as almost like, a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Right? So coming in and actually saying some of the truth of what was happening. They even show her at one point writing questions for the senators who were going to be interviewing Mark Zuckerberg in the hearings,
right,
and whatnot. And so they kind of portray her as, going against this machine and coming up and actually just being honest about what was happening,
right,
inside of Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the documentary, it kind of goes over, what Cambridge Analytica was, what it was doing, who was involved, and why we should care, right? And so there's a couple whistleblowers that came up, a couple people that like brought up these questions. The one that was the most intriguing in this documentary was Brittany Kaiser, because her background was very interesting. She worked on the Obama campaign. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, she was a very progressive. Her politics are very progressive. She's portrayed as kind of, she was very progressive. And then she got lured into Cambridge Analytica by the Knicks. And basically what happened is she got overwhelmed by the money. She got paid. She got paid by them, whereas the Democratic campaigns weren't paying people. She got paid, and then also she very much, is portrayed as like realizing how serious this is and how she was giving up lots of information. But throughout the film, she was asked several questions like, didn't you think that this was a problem, like when you were in the middle of doing this? And she was very like, her moral compass, her like character was very slippery. Like she didn't see any problem with experimenting on people. She didn't even see it as an experiment. She really just saw herself as like doing her job and really kind of getting into the just how like sexy the internet and technology is, and you can kind of get taken up by all the money and prestige, right? But it, she definitely gave up some information that was damaging to Cambridge Analytica. And so it's kind of like she's kind of this slippery character where she does some good things, but then there's also like, I'm pulling my hair out like over her choices. Like she did so much damage. She assisted in so much damage. And she's like, oh, I didn't know.
I know that at least for me personally, I'll be honest to myself, it's very easy for me to just slip into choosing to blame things on men in power. And so I actually feel more of a tendency to just kind of be mad at, Alexander Nix and the group that was at the top there, because I know that, she's quite young too, mm-hmm. right? And I know that I've been in rooms at times where people in power have said things that I didn't agree with and that I didn't, but you're so uncomfortable, you just kind of do that uncomfortable laugh. You know the one I'm talking about, where you go home and then you think, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I do something?
Or she's the same age as you and I, being a millennial woman and growing up and getting out of college, and then getting, when you're first out of college, it's hard getting a job. It's hard to like be validated that you're actually smart and you know what you're doing and all these things. And so, I've been also in rooms where people have say, oh, you're my girl Friday, or, oh, Adrienne knows everything. She has the keys to the kingdom or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you get like this, and I totally
validation.
know. Yes. You get this like validation from older people,
and that you're so special and intelligent, and like you're in that room when other people aren't. And
exactly, and it's intoxicating. It really is. And so I do have some sympathy for her. I do. I just when she talked about being her own politics and then knowingly creating psyop campaigns for the GOP. Like, I don't know. I'm just, where she has no like like a principled person would be like, you know what? Thanks for the job. I'm sure you'll find somebody who is more aligned with your values in in that job. You don't have to be mean. If someone were to come up to me and who's very opposite of me in philosophies and they offer me a job, you can say no, but you can say like, you know what? That's not aligned to my values, but I know there's somebody out there who really is, and they'll be great. I just don't understand how, like, she just turned down that little voice inside her that was like, I just don't understand that part. It's very upsetting to me.
I feel sympathy for us as a nation. I mean, I feel sympathy for us as families. The way that this and other misinformation continues to pervade our public discourse is tragic. It's tragic because there is a very vast group of us who don't even quite understand how these social media platforms work. Yep. And so we can do a little bit of Googling, we can do a little bit of research on Facebook, and we think that we understand a topic. And this has happened for me before too.
Yep.
But then what it does is it's causing these divides that polarizes people so much that we can't have discussion. Nothing can happen. We can't move forward on anything because we're so divided, because we don't even see the same reality. Why? Because we don't even see the same feeds. It's just like it shows in The Social Dilemma. When we're logging in and we've created these echo chambers based on our social media activity, and those echo chambers are being infiltrated by more and more ad dollars that are propaganda, they are dividing us and dividing us. I just wish social media for good as a concept could have started 20 years ago, so that people like Brittany Kaiser could be able to just know right away, oh, well, that's social media for bad. Hell no. You know?
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, or oh, like, how exactly does this work? Oh, you mean we are banking, we are making money off of a political campaign. We're banking off of people who are persuadable for whatever reason, and we're spreading rumors. We're making money off of
millions.
Rumors.
We're making millions on lies.
Money off of rumors and lies. And the part that just like Brittany Kaiser in this film quote said, "The main problem in U.S. politics is that people are so polarized that they can't understand each other, and therefore they can't work together, and therefore nothing gets done." And she says this when she's answering someone. She joined the NRA, and she kind of had this persona of, GOP, conservative person, which was completely opposite of what she was at the beginning. She kind of assumed she played the part. And part of it is like, there's this grain in me where I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, like, you should be open to other people's philosophies, and you should try to understand them. Even though if it's not for you, you should still, not judge it or knock it down. But that was what she said in response to somebody being like, I thought you were very much against guns and you joined the NRA. And then she kind of justified this to herself by saying this: the main problem in U.S. politics is that people are so polarized that they can't understand each other, and therefore can't work together. So she's like, oh, I'm going to join the NRA to show that, like, I can work with people. But I'm just like, but we're polarized because of you.
Because the exploitation of those differences.
I'm just like, can you hear yourself? I just, okay. Mm-hmm.
So
Anyway.
David Carroll in the film said people don't want to admit that propaganda works because to admit it means confronting our own susceptibilities, a horrific lack of privacy, and hopeless dependency on tech platforms ruining our democracies on various attack surfaces. It's a lot to accept. Yep. It is. It's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard to accept that as a reality, especially if you feel like you yourself might have been a persuadable. I feel like I've probably been a persuadable at many points in my voting life to this point.
For sure. And again, one thing I do want to reiterate: this is focused on Cambridge Analytica, where like the bad guys in the room are the right wing GOP of the United States using these tools. These tools are used by all different types of organizations, all types of organizations that don't have a moral compass, that don't use social media for good. And that could be many different kinds of people and organizations. So Lacey, I totally also, any piece of content that like makes you react in rage, like,
like we're doing right now.
Yes. On Facebook that scrolls past your news feed, or like, something hateful that somebody says, or just, an opinion that you really, really disagree with, those kinds of that stuff, those reactions are what all of this social media works off of. So if we don't give it to them, they can't have it. So yeah.
So I think here's a few takeaways. Okay, let's try to wrap this with a bow for a second. Okay, let's all be always mindful of where our content is coming from. Okay, especially if it makes us react strongly. Okay, we see a video about a movement. I mean, we didn't even hit on the fact that there were Russian agencies who were infiltrating during Black Lives Matter, creating fake events and inviting people to fake marches. So this isn't just every time that there's a political campaign. It's actually every time that there's this social issue that can divide people, it's happening from many different sources. Right. So order one of the day, our challenge for you, order one is check your sources. Anytime that you're feeling triggered and you're feeling emotional about something, click back as far as you can to see who created this piece of content. How long ago was the page created? Are there actual individuals that are there? Can you see what the disclaimer says? What ads are these people running? It literally takes you like three minutes at the most. And like, how much is your rage worth? I think it's worth like 3 minutes, you know? So that's one takeaway. Do you have another takeaway that you want people to do to kind of, to help us bridge the gap of the propaganda gap that's been created between all of us?
I think that a big piece is motivations. Look at human motivations. Why would somebody benefit from you being mad or angry or not doing something or doing something? Who's benefiting? Is it you? Like, are you as a person, are you like, yeah, I really have already been thinking about doing this thing and it would really like, I just want to do this or not, you know? But you know, if like a piece of social media content comes through and makes you like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. You know, because conspiracy theorists like on the YouTubes, there's so many different people. And again, the psyops thing, who benefits by you doing or not doing something? Just think about that. Like really think about that. And also just really think about your values. Like I think that so many people like have their, you know, their core beliefs like challenged, and then they kind of move over to a new plane because they've been repeatedly had this information just pounded at them. So stick to your core values, remember who you are, and think about who benefits from your actions and rage.
And research who it is that's putting this information out as far as you can to the source. 3 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, that's your that's your main takeaways for today. There's a lot wrong on social media right now. There's a lot wrong, but it's not going anywhere. And so the best that we can do is research, learn, and do our best to use social media for good. So we're going to keep doing our best, and we hope that you will too.
Yes.
Adrienne, thank you for your time today. As always, I adore you.
Thank you.
Those of you listening, we appreciate you very much, and we hope that you will keep learning, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
This SprySpace podcast is brought to you by Spry Social Media Marketing, Digital Marketing Agility, edited by Chad Hinman and executive produced by Lacey Fott.